The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the empty highway. Dust devils swirled in the distance, kicking up grit that stung the eyes of anyone foolish enough to stare too long. In the middle of this desolate stretch, a young boy named Ethan crouched beside a rumbling Harley, his small hands trembling as he pointed at the rear wheel. The tire looked fine at first glance, black rubber gleaming under the fading light, but Ethan's sharp eyes had caught the anomaly. A faint wobble, a subtle shimmy that no adult rushing by would notice. His heart pounded as he glanced up at the rider, a weathered man in his 40s named Jacob, who was fiddling with his GPS, oblivious to the danger. The wheel's axle was loose, compromised by miles of hard riding, and at highway speeds it could shear off like a brittle bone, sending the bike and its rider into a deadly spin. Ethan's voice cracked as he shouted, "Mister, your wheel, it's gonna break! Stop!" Jacob froze, his calloused hand pausing mid-air. He'd been riding alone for hours, the wind whipping through his greying beard, carrying echoes of a life he'd tried to outrun. 20 years ago, in the dust-choked valleys of a forgotten war, he'd made a promise to his best friend, Daniel, a vow etched in blood and brotherhood. "If your kid ever needs me, I'll be there, no questions." Daniel hadn't made it back, his body lost in the chaos, leaving behind a widow and a boy too young to remember his father's face. Jacob had drifted into the Iron Promise Motorcycle Club, a ragtag family of veterans and outcasts bound by leather vests and unspoken oaths. But that promise, it had faded like an old tattoo, buried under layers of regret and solitary miles. Now this kid, scrawny, with dirt-streaked cheeks and eyes wide with urgency, was staring at him like he held the key to survival. The boy backed away as Jacob dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The air smelled of hot metal and exhaust, the engine's low growl fading to a tick as it cooled. Jacob knelt, his knees protesting the motion, and inspected the wheel. Sure enough, the nut was backing off, threads worn from neglect. A fraction more speed, and it would have been catastrophe, metal twisting, flames licking the guardrail, a life snuffed out in an instant. "How'd you spot that, kid?" Jacob asked, his voice gravelly from disuse, surprise flickering in his hazel eyes. Ethan shrugged, kicking at a pebble, but his gaze darted nervously to the horizon. "I watch bikes sometimes. My dad, he used to fix 'em." The words hung heavy, unspoken grief lacing the air between them. Jacob's chest tightened. The boy couldn't be more than 10, the same age Daniel's son would be now, if the letters from the widow were true. He hadn't checked in years, shame keeping him away, but fate had a way of dragging old ghosts into the light. "You saved my hide today," Jacob said, tightening the axle with a wrench from his saddlebag. The metallic clink echoed like a judgment. "What's your name?" "Ethan, and you?" "Jacob. Ride with Iron Promise." He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky in bruised oranges. In that moment, something shifted, a spark of the old vow reigniting. This wasn't just a roadside fix. It felt like destiny's nudge, pulling him toward a purpose he'd abandoned. Ethan's eyes lit up at the club name, recognition dawning. "My uncle talks about you guys, said you're like guardians on the road." Jacob chuckled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Guardians, if only. His own scars ran deep, shrapnel embedded in his shoulder from that final ambush. Nightmares of Daniel's last breath haunting his sleep. He joined Iron Promise, seeking redemption, riding with brothers who understood the weight of promises kept in silence. But lately, the club had fractures. Rumors of a corrupt sheriff shaking down riders for protection, turning the open road into a trap. Jacob had pulled back, riding solo to avoid the storm. Now, this boy's warning felt like a sign. Honor demanded he step up, not just for himself, but for the fragile bonds that held men like him together. As the wheel steadied, Jacob offered Ethan a ride to the next town, a dusty speck called Haven's Edge, where neon signs flickered promises of diners and motels. The boy hesitated, glancing back at a beat-up sedan idling 100 yards off. Its driver, a gaunt woman with tired eyes, watching intently. "Mom's waiting," Ethan said. "She doesn't like strangers." But he climbed on anyway, clutching Jacob's waist as the engine roared to life. The vibration thrummed through them, a heartbeat against the encroaching dusk. They rode in companionable silence, the wind carrying whispers of what might come. A family in peril, secrets unraveling, and a rider forced to honor a debt older than the miles. Haven's Edge materialized like a mirage, boarded-up shops lining a main street, the air thick with the scent of fried onions from a lone diner. Jacob pulled up outside a weathered garage, its sign reading Dan's Repairs in peeling letters. His blood ran cold. Daniel's place? The widow had mentioned keeping it open, a tribute to the man gone too soon. Ethan hopped off, pointing eagerly. "That's my uncle's shop. He taught me about wheels." Jacob's mind reeled. Coincidence? Or the promise calling him home? Inside the garage, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating tools scattered like forgotten memories. A man in grease-stained overalls emerged, broad-shouldered, with a limp that mirrored Jacob's own war wounds. "Ethan, who's this?" the man asked, eyeing the biker warily. "Uncle Ryan," Ethan beamed. "This is Jacob. He almost crashed, but I fixed it." Ryan's face paled, recognition dawning like a slow sunrise. "Jacob? From Daniel's unit?" The air thickened, charged with the ghosts of brotherhood. Jacob nodded, throat tight. "Heard you might need a hand around here. Old promise to a friend." Ryan's eyes softened, the weight of years lifting slightly. "Daniel always said you'd come back. Things are rough. Sheriff's been leaning on us, saying the garage violates some code. We're barely holding on." As night fell, the three sat under the garage's flickering bulb, sharing stories over lukewarm coffee. Ethan listened wide-eyed, absorbing tales of desert rides and unbreakable bonds. Jacob felt the pull of family, not by blood but by choice, the kind forged in fire and kept through storms. But shadows loomed. The sheriff's corruption wasn't just threats. Whispers spoke of rigged accidents, lives upended for profit. Jacob's hand rested on his handlebars, resolve hardening. The boy's sharp eyes had saved him once. Now it was time to return the favor, to ride for justice in a world that had forgotten honor. Outside, the highway hummed with distant traffic, a reminder that danger never slept. Jacob knew this was just the beginning, a thread pulling him into a web of loyalty tested, secrets unearthed, and a redemption that would demand everything. For Daniel, for Ethan, for the promise that refused to die. The fluorescent hum in the garage seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the oil-stained concrete floor. Jacob leaned against a workbench cluttered with wrenches and half-rebuilt carburetors, the scent of stale coffee mingling with the sharp tang of motor oil. Ryan paced slowly, his limp more pronounced under the weight of the words he was about to spill. Ethan sat cross-legged on a stool nearby, fiddling with a loose bolt, his young face a mask of quiet intensity, absorbing every syllable like a sponge. "It started small," Ryan said, his voice low, as if the walls themselves might carry tales to the wrong ears. "The sheriff, calls himself Harlan Tate, rolled into Haven's Edge a couple years back with a shiny badge and a grudge against folks like us. At first, it was just fines for noise violations when we fired up the engines at dawn. Then it escalated. He claims the garage doesn't meet some vague safety code, demands kickbacks to look the other way. We're talking thousands, Jacob. Money we don't have since Daniel passed." Jacob's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming absently on the scarred wooden surface. Harlan Tate. The name stirred a vague memory from club chatter. a lawman with ties to shady developers eyeing the land along Route 17 for some big-box sprawl. Iron Promise had crossed paths with his type before, badges that bent for the highest bidder, turning small towns into fiefdoms. "And you've got proof?" Jacob asked, his hazel eyes narrowing, the gravel in his tone betraying the storm brewing inside. Ryan nodded, pulling a crumpled folder from a drawer locked with a rusted padlock. Inside were faded receipts, scribbled threats on official letterhead, even a grainy photo of Tate's cruiser parked ominously outside the garage one midnight, lights off like a predator in wait. "Ethan saw more than he should," Ryan continued, glancing at the boy with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Kid's got eyes like his dad. Caught Tate tampering with a customer's brake line last month. Said it looked like he was loosening something to make it fail on the highway. We reported it anonymously, but nothing came of it." "Tate's got the whole department in his pocket." Ethan looked up, his small hands stilling. "I didn't mean to spy, Uncle Ryan, but the wheel on that truck, it was wobbling just like yours, Mr. Jacob. I told Mom, but she said to stay out of it." The boy's voice trembled, not from fear, but from the injustice of it all, a child's pure sense of right clashing against a world's crooked grain. Jacob felt a pang, sharp as shrapnel, remembering Daniel's letters, tales of a son who fixed toys with mechanical precision, who dreamed of roads stretching forever. The garage door rattled suddenly, a gust of night wind slipping through the cracks, carrying the distant wail of a siren that faded into the dark. Jacob straightened, instincts honed from years on the road kicking in. This Tate, he's not just shaking you down for cash, sounds like he's engineering wrecks to clear the way, insurance payouts, land grabs. It's a racket. He'd seen it in other dusty towns, corrupt officials staging accidents to discredit locals, forcing sales at fire sale prices. Iron Promise had ridden against such shadows before, their vests a shield of solidarity. But Jacob had walked away from the club's last standoff, the memory of a brother's bike, mangled in a freak crash, still fresh. Guilt had kept him solo. But now, with Ethan's gaze on him, that old promise clawed its way back. Ryan rubbed his chin, the stubble rasping like sandpaper. "Daniel would have fought it head-on. He always said you were the steady one, the guy who kept the line when things got hot. If you're here because of that vow, we could use you, but it's dangerous. Tate's not alone. He's got deputies, maybe even some locals turning a blind eye for a cut." Jacob pushed off the bench, the creak of his leather jacket echoing in the quiet space. He stepped outside, the cool night air hitting him like a slap, stars pricking the velvet sky above the silhouette of Haven's Edge. The highway hummed faintly, a ribbon of black cutting through the desert's embrace, where danger lurked in every mile. He thought of Daniel's last moments, the ambush in the valleys, the blood oath sworn under fire. "Watch over them, Jake. Be the family we lost." He'd failed then, too lost in his own scars. But this was a chance to mend the frayed edges of honor. Back inside, he found Ethan helping Ryan sort tools, the boy's laughter a brief light in the gloom as he mimicked the sound of a revving engine. "We ride at first light," Jacob said, decision settling like dust after a storm. "I'll call in the club. Iron Promise doesn't let brothers or their kin face this alone." Ryan's eyes widened, gratitude flickering like the bulb overhead. But doubt lingered. Jacob could see it. The sheriff's reach was long, and one loose axle could spell doom for more than just a lone rider. As the clock ticked past midnight, the three settled into uneasy vigilance. Ethan curled up on a cot in the corner, his breathing steady, dreams likely filled with gleaming wheels and endless horizons. Ryan sketched a rough map of Tate's patrols on a napkin, his limp forgotten in the heat of planning. Jacob sat by the open door, nursing a mug of black coffee, the bitterness mirroring his resolve. The wind whispered through the cracks, carrying scents of sage and distant rain, a reminder that redemption wasn't a straight road. It twisted, tested, demanded everything. But in the quiet, Jacob felt the pull of chosen family strengthening, threads weaving tighter against the gathering storm. Tate's corruption wasn't just a threat to the garage, it eroded the soul of places like Haven's Edge, where promises were the only currency that mattered. And Jacob, scarred rider that he was, would not let it claim another piece of Daniel's legacy. The engine of justice was idling, ready to roar. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first rays of dawn slice through the horizon like golden blades, painting the desert in hues of amber and rust. Jacob's Harley idled outside the garage, its engine a low, throaty rumble that vibrated through the gravel lot, chasing away the night's chill. He zipped his leather vest, the iron promise patch, a weathered iron fist clutching a chain, catching the light as he swung a leg over the seat. Ryan emerged from the shadows of Dan's repairs, his limp softened by determination, a thermos of coffee tucked under one arm. Ethan trailed behind, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes bright with a mix of excitement and nerves, the scent of fresh dew clinging to the air like a fragile hope. "You sure about calling them in?" Ryan asked, handing Jacob the thermos. Steam curled upward, carrying the bitter aroma that grounded them both. The highway stretched empty before them, a silver vein pulsing under the awakening sky. But Jacob knew better. Eyes could be watching from the ridges, badges gleaming in the half-light. Daniel's promise wasn't just words, Jacob replied, his voice steady as the engine's hum. He took a swig, the heat searing his throat, a reminder of the fire that had forged their bond. "Iron promise rides for family, yours now." He'd made the call at 3 a.m. A voice hushed into his phone as club brothers stirred from their own restless sleeps across state lines. Noah, the grizzled sergeant-at-arms, had grunted approval. "Wheels up by sunrise. For the kid." Now, as the sun crested, distant roars echoed from the east, approaching thunder, a convoy of chrome and loyalty materializing like ghosts summoned from the dunes. Ethan climbed onto the back of Ryan's old chopper, a relic from Daniel's days, its paint chipped but frame unyielding. "Will they come for real?" the boy asked, gripping the handles, wind tousling his hair as they pulled out. Jacob led the way, the trio forming a tight formation, dust trailing in their wake like a banner of defiance. The road curved gently, sagebrush whispering against the tires, the air alive with the promise of confrontation. Jacob's mind replayed the war-torn nights, Daniel's laugh cutting through the tension, his hand on Jacob's shoulder during the oath. "We protect our own, Jake, no matter the miles." That vow had pulled him from solitude. Now it bound him to this dusty crossroads. By mid-morning, they reached the outskirts of Haven's Edge, where the town huddled against the desert's edge like a wary sentinel. The convoy arrived in a symphony of engines, 15 bikes strong, vests emblazoned with the club's emblem, riders nodding solemnly as they encircled the garage. Noah dismounted first, his broad frame casting a shadow, beard streaked with silver from battles long past. "Heard about the loose wheels and crooked badges," he said, clasping Jacob's forearm in a grip that spoke of unbreakable trust. "Iron promise doesn't let that slide." The men, veterans like Samuel and Andrew, mechanics with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much, spread out, tools clinking as they inspected the shop's perimeter, senses attuned to threats hidden in the ordinary. Inside, over maps spread on the workbench, Ryan outlined Tate's patterns: patrols at noon, shakedowns after dusk, a cruiser that prowled like a shark scenting blood. "He's got a deputy, Lucas, who turns blind eyes for a share," Ryan said, tracing routes with a grease pencil. The air thickened with tension, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting halos on determined faces. Ethan hovered nearby, pointing out spots where he'd seen the tampering, innocent observations from a child who saw truth where adults saw shadows. Jacob watched him, heart aching with echoes of Daniel's pride in letters never answered. This boy, with his keen gaze, embodied the legacy, small acts of vigilance weaving into the fabric of justice. As noon approached, the first test came. A black and white cruiser nosing down the main street, its tires crunching over potholes like bones underfoot. Harlan Tate stepped out, badge glinting under the relentless sun, his frame lean and predatory, eyes scanning the assembly with feigned nonchalance. The scent of hot asphalt rose, mixing with the club's exhaust, a volatile brew. "Morning, folks," Tate drawled, sauntering closer, his boots polished to a mocking shine. "Heard you got company. This a reunion or a roadblock?" His gaze lingered on Jacob, recognition flickering. Rumors of Iron Promise's interventions had reached even this forsaken stretch. Jacob stepped forward, arms crossed, the sun warming his back like an old ally. "Just fixing what's broken, Sheriff. Like axles, or codes that don't add up." The words hung sharp, a subtle jab that rippled through the riders. Noah flanked him, silent but imposing, while Ryan shielded Ethan behind the garage door, the boy's wide eyes peering through a crack. Tate's smile didn't reach his eyes, a crack in the facade of authority. "Careful, biker. This town's got rules. Violate 'em and wheels come off for good." He spat on the ground, the glob darkening the dust, before retreating to his cruiser, engine revving as it peeled away, leaving a wake of suspicion. The encounter lingered like smoke, charging the air with urgency. Jacob gathered the club under the garage's awning, voices low as plans solidified. Stakeouts at dusk, anonymous tips to state oversight. A ride to expose Tate's handiwork on abandoned stretches of Route 17. Samuel, the quiet one with scars mapping his arms, shared a tale from their last stand. A corrupt official, toppled not by fists, but by the weight of truth, riders testifying in quiet solidarity. "Honor rides deeper than revenge," he said, and Jacob nodded, feeling the moral compass steady. But doubt gnawed. Tate's web was tangled, and one wrong move could ensnare the innocent like Ethan, whose sharp eyes had ignited this fire. As afternoon waned, the group dispersed into shifts, engines fading into patrols that blanketed the town. Jacob took Ethan for a short spin on a side road, the wind whipping their faces, carrying scents of wildflowers crushed under tires. "You did good spotting that wheel," Jacob said over the roar. "Keeps us all rolling straight." The boy grinned, clutching tighter, a bond forming in the rush of air, mentor and charge, echoing the brotherhood lost to war. Back at the garage, Ryan waited with news. A customer's truck, brakes suspiciously worn, had nearly failed that morning. Tate's shadow lengthened, night crept in, stars emerging like distant witnesses. The highway a dark artery pulsing with peril. Jacob stood watch, coffee cooling in his hand, the club's presence a bulwark against corruption's tide. Redemption wasn't a solitary ride. It was this, chosen kin standing firm, promises enduring against the grind of injustice. Yet as a lone coyote howled in the distance, Jacob sensed the storm building, ethical lines blurring under pressure. Tate wouldn't yield easily, and the road to justice demanded sacrifices etched in loyalty's unyielding steel. The garage lights dimmed to a watchful glow, engines silent but ready, the night alive with the quiet resolve of men who knew the cost of honor. For Daniel's memory, for Ethan's future, Jacob would ride into the fray, the promise a beacon cutting through the gathering dark. The moon hung high over Haven's edge, a silver sentinel casting pale light across the garage's lot, where shadows pooled like spilled oil under the bikes. Jacob shifted on the stool by the open door, his boots scraping the concrete, the night air thick with the scent of cooling engines and distant creosote bushes. The Iron Promise riders had settled into a vigilant rhythm, Samuel on perimeter watch, his silhouette pacing the fence line like a ghost, Andrew nursing a thermos inside, murmuring strategies with Ryan over a flickering lantern. Ethan had finally drifted off on the cot, his chest rising and falling in innocent rhythm, oblivious to the web tightening around them. But Jacob couldn't shake the unease gnawing at his gut, sharper than the shrapnel scar under his vest. Tate's parting glare that afternoon had been a promise of its own. Cold, calculated, the kind that turned roads into graveyards. A low rumble broke the silence, not from the highway but from the east, where Noah's bike growled back into the lot, headlights cutting through the dark like accusatory beams. He killed the engine and dismounted, his heavy steps echoing as he approached, face etched with the lines of hard miles. "Scouted the ridge," Noah said, voice a rumble matching his beard's gravel. He pulled a crumpled map from his jacket, spreading it on the workbench under the dim bulb. "Tate's cruisers, parked off route, near the old quarry. Lights off, but there's movement. Two shadows, maybe his deputy Lucas, looked like they were rigging something. Wires, tools. Could be another brake job." Jacob leaned in, the map's ink blurring slightly in the low light, his finger tracing the quarry's jagged outline, a forgotten pit where locals dumped scrap, far from prying eyes. The air hummed with tension, the faint tick of metal contracting in the cooling night, amplifying the stakes. Ryan joined them, his limp a soft shuffle, eyes shadowed by worry. "That's where they hit last time. Customer lost control on the curve coming back, blamed it on wear and tear. But Ethan saw the deputy fiddling with the lines days before." The boy stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about wheels, and Jacob's resolve hardened like forged steel. This wasn't random malice, it was a systematic unraveling of lives, all to grease the wheels of some land scheme. Developers circling Route 17 like vultures, Tate their enforcer, turning safety into a commodity. "We can't wait for proof to fall in our laps," Jacob said, folding the map with deliberate care, the paper crackling like dry bones. His mind flashed to Daniel's final patrol, the ambush in the valleys, where hesitation had cost everything. He'd sworn then to protect what remained, but grief had chained him to solitary rides, evading the club's calls until this pull dragged him back. Noah clapped a hand on his shoulder, the grip a silent affirmation of brotherhood, scars mirroring scars. "We ride quiet, scout it ourselves. If it's tampering, we document. Cameras, witnesses, no guns, no brawls. Iron Promise fights with truth, not fists." Andrew nodded from the shadows, his quiet demeanor belying the fire in his eyes. Another veteran haunted by a brother's ghost from the same war. "I'll kit up the dash cams. We loop the quarry at dawn before Tate's shift ends." The plan wove through the night. Voices low and measured, the garage a fortress of whispers against the encroaching void. Ryan hesitated, glancing at Ethan's sleeping form. "What if it goes south? Tate's got the law on paper. One wrong move, and we're the outlaws." Doubt flickered in his eyes, the weight of guardianship pressing down, the same burden Daniel had carried, now passed like a frayed torch. Jacob met his gaze, the bulb's glow reflecting the steel in his own. "That's why we're here. Promises aren't kept in safety, they're forged in the storm." He stepped outside, the gravel crunching underfoot, cool wind brushing his face like a forgotten caress. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to human frailties, and he thought of the boy's sharp eyes spotting the wobble that saved him. Ethan represented more than kin. He was the fragile thread of redemption, a chance to honor Daniel not with regret, but action. The club's arrival had mended a rift in Jacob's soul, pulling him from isolation into this chosen family, where loyalty was the engine driving them forward. Dawn crept in stealthily, painting the horizon in muted grays, the air crisp with the promise of dew-kissed sage. The riders mobilized silently, 5 bikes this time, engines muffled to purrs as they slipped onto the back roads, dust minimal under careful throttles. Jacob led, Noah flanking, the convoy a shadow gliding toward the quarry. The descent was steep, tires gripping loose shale, the scent of damp earth rising like a warning. They crested a ridge, halting behind a cluster of boulders, and peered down. Tate's cruiser sat idle, hood up. The sheriff and Lucas bent over what looked like a salvaged truck axle, tools glinting in the first light. A faint clink carried on the breeze. Perhaps a loosened bolt, engineered failure in the making. Jacob's heart thudded, pulse sinking with the idling engines. He pulled out a small camera, zooming in, the lens capturing the damning scene. Tate's gloved hand twisting a nut free. Lucas scanning the perimeter with paranoid sweeps, no words exchanged, just the efficiency of routine corruption. "Got it," Jacob whispered, the shutters click a moral victory in the hush. But as they prepared to withdraw, a twig snapped nearby, too deliberate for wildlife. Lucas's head snapped up, eyes locking on their position, radio crackling to life. "Intruders on the ridge." The deputy's shout shattered the dawn, Tate bolting upright, hand dropping to his holster. Engines roared in response, the bikes surging back up the slope, gravel spraying like shrapnel. Jacob gunned the throttle, wind whipping his beard, the chase igniting a fire in his veins, pursuit through twisting paths, the cruiser's siren wailing behind like a banshee. They split the group, Noah veering left to draw fire, while Jacob and Andrew raced toward Haven's edge, camera clutched tight in his vest. Bullets? No. Tate played subtler, but the threat loomed in every curve, brakes tested on the unforgiving terrain. They burst onto the main road, the town's rooftops emerging like salvation, the garage a beacon ahead. Ryan waited at the door, Ethan beside him, the boy's face pale but fierce. "What happened?" Ryan demanded as Jacob skidded to a halt, dust clouding the air. Noah and the others followed, breathless, confirming the escape. Jacob handed over the footage, the digital weight heavier than lead. Proof, enough to crack his shell. But elation soured. Tate's retaliation would be swift, a storm aimed at the vulnerable. The garage, the boy, the fragile oaths holding them together. As the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the lot, Jacob gathered them inside, the air thick with resolve and the faint hum of replaying video. Ethan watched the screen, his small fist clenching. "They're making more bad wheels," he said simply, the injustice fueling his young fire. Jacob ruffled his hair, a paternal gesture born of loss. This confrontation had drawn battle lines, ethical dilemmas sharpening, expose Tate and risk the club's safety, or ride silent and let corruption fester. Redemption demanded the former, loyalty the balance. The promise to Daniel pulsed stronger, a moral compass guiding through the haze. Yet in the quiet aftermath, Jacob sensed fractures, Ryan's worry for Ethan, Noah's subtle glance at his own scarred hands, questioning the cost. The road to justice twisted onward, demanding sacrifices that tested the soul. Outside, the highway beckoned, a ribbon of peril and purpose, where honor's engine revved against the tide of wrong. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these stories of quiet courage far and wide. The midday sun beat down on Haven's edge like a relentless interrogator, turning the garage lot into a furnace of shimmering heat waves that distorted the air. Jacob wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging the faint scar above his eye, a souvenir from the valleys where promises were born in blood. Inside Dan's repairs, the group huddled around the workbench, the small camera's screen replaying the footage in grainy loops, Tate's gloved hand twisting the axle nut, Lucas's vigilant scan, the quarry's dust swirling like complicit secrets. The images burned into their minds, a silent accusation against the badge that should have protected, not prayed. Noah leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the display, the scent of leather and road dust clinging to him like a second skin. "This nails 'em," he growled, voice thick with the satisfaction of hard-won truth. But his eyes, shadowed by years of club skirmishes, held a cautionary glint. "State troopers'll want more than video, witnesses, patterns. Tate's got friends in high places. One leak, and this blows back on us." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, syncing with the tension coiling in the room, where tools lay forgotten amid the maps and mugs of cooling coffee. Ryan paced the narrow aisle between engine parts, his limp a rhythmic reminder of shared scars, the concrete floor scuffed from decades of honest labor. "Ethan's testimony alone could bury them," he said, glancing at the boy perched on the stool, small fingers tracing the edge of the workbench. But doubt laced his words, paternal fear sharpening the edges. "He's just a kid, Jacob. Dragging him into this. It's like pulling Daniel back into the fire." The air thickened with the weight of that name, evoking ghosts of laughter around campfires, oaths sworn under starless skies. Jacob felt it acutely, the promise he'd buried under solitary miles, now demanding payment in full. Ethan looked up, his dirt-streaked face set with a determination that belied his years, eyes reflecting the same unyielding clarity that had spotted the wobble on Jacob's wheel. "I saw it, Uncle Ryan. They're hurting people on purpose, like if someone fixed my bike wrong." His voice was steady, small but unbowed, cutting through the adult's hesitation like a clean spark plug. Jacob knelt to his level, the creak of his knees echoing the groan of old frames under strain. "You're braver than most men I've ridden with, kid. But bravery's got a price. Ask your dad's brothers." He thought of Daniel's letters, faded in a drawer back at the clubhouse. Words of a father proud of a son who fixed what others broke. This boy was that legacy, fragile yet fierce, pulling Jacob from the edges of regret. Outside, the highway's distant hum intruded like an uninvited guest, a reminder that Tate's retaliation brewed in the heat. As if summoned, a dust cloud heralded an approaching vehicle. Not the cruiser, but a nondescript sedan, its tires kicking up gravel as it pulled into the lot. The iron promise riders tensed, hands drifting to tool belts rather than holsters. Honor their weapon of choice. Samuel stepped forward, his scarred arms crossed, while Andrew flanked the door, quiet vigilance in every line of his posture. The driver emerged, a wiry woman in her 50s, face lined with the weariness of small-town secrets, clutching a manila envelope like a shield. "I'm Clara from the diner," she said, voice hushed as she scanned the assembly, the sun glinting off her glasses. "Heard the engines rolling in. Tate's been leaning on me too. Says my grease traps violate codes unless I pay up, but I saw him last week out by the quarry, same as your boy described. Here." She thrust the envelope at Jacob, who took it gingerly, the paper warm from her grip. Inside, a logbook page, timestamps of Tate's off-duty visits, even a blurry phone snap of the sheriff's truck loaded with scrap parts. Not much, but it matches. Folks are tired of bending. Jacob's pulse quickened, the pieces slotting like gears in a well-oiled machine. Clara's contribution wove into their web of proof, a thread of communal resolve against institutional rot. "You're risking a lot," he said, meeting her gaze, the wind carrying the faint aroma of frying oil from her apron. She shrugged, a wry smile cracking her facade. "Daniel fixed my husband's rig back in the day. Kept us running when times were lean. Owe it to that kind of promise." With a nod to Ethan, who watched wide-eyed, she retreated to her car, engine coughing to life as it vanished into the haze. The revelation ignited a spark in the garage, voices rising in measured debate. Noah advocated pushing the evidence to a state investigator he knew from old roots, a neutral ear unbound by local strings. Ryan countered with caution, suggesting they fortify the garage first, Reinforced locks, rotating watches, a barrier against Tate's inevitable strike. He'll come at us sideways, citations, raids, maybe frame a rider for something petty. The air hummed with ethical friction, the moral tightrope of justice versus safety. Jacob mediated, his gravelly tone cutting through, drawing from war lessons where hesitation bred loss. We expose him clean. No vigilante rides, but we protect our own. Ethan first. T. The boy beamed at the mention, a silent pact forming, his presence the moral anchor grounding their storm. As evening bled into the sky, painting it in strokes of crimson and indigo, the club executed the first layer of defense. Bikes formed a loose perimeter around the garage, engines idling like watchful sentinels, the scent of exhaust mingling with cooling earth. Jacob took Ethan aside to the back lot, under the sagging awning where stars began to prick the dusk. "Spotting that wheel wasn't luck," he said, handing the boy a flashlight, its beam cutting the gloom. "It's seeing what others miss. Keep those eyes open. They're our best defense." Ethan nodded, clicking the light on and off, mimicking the rhythm of a heartbeat. In that moment, Jacob saw Daniel in him. The quiet integrity, the unshakable loyalty that war had tried to erase but couldn't. Night deepened, the temperature dropping like a veil, coyotes yipping in the distance as if mocking the fragility of plans. Inside, Ryan shared a meal of diner sandwiches Clara had slipped in with her drop-off, the group eating in companionable silence, broken by tales of past stands. A sheriff toppled by rider testimonies, a family saved from eviction through pooled resources. Laughter flickered, brief as fireflies, knitting the chosen family tighter. Yet Jacob sensed the psychological toll, the way Noah's grip tightened on his mug, Andrew's gaze lingering on the highway, Ryan's limp worsening from unspoken stress. Corruption didn't just threaten bodies, it eroded spirits, testing oaths against the grind of fear. A sudden crackle from the radio shattered the calm, Tate's frequency, intercepted by Samuel's jury-rigged scanner. "Tighten the noose on that garage. Make it look like negligence. The kid's the weak link." The words hung venomous, ice in Jacob's veins, despite the lingering warmth of the day. Tate was escalating, aiming at the heart of their vulnerability. Jacob rose, resolve crystallizing like dew on chrome. "We move at first light, deliver the proof ourselves, straight to the state line if we have to." The promise to Daniel thrummed alive, redemption no longer a solitary echo but a chorus of steel and will. The garage fell into watchful quiet, lights dimmed to slits, the night alive with the subtle shifts of guardians. Ethan slept soundly, dreams likely of straight-running wheels and endless roads. Jacob stood vigil by the door, wind whispering through cracks, carrying scents of sage and impending rain. Justice's path twisted sharper now, dilemmas pressing, shield the boy or charge the fray. Loyalty demanded both, honor the bridge. In the chosen family's embrace, Jacob found strength, the engine of purpose revving against the dark tide. Tate's web would fray, thread by moral thread, until truth roared free. The first light of dawn filtered through the garage's grimy windows like a hesitant promise, casting elongated shadows across the oil-slicked floor where the iron promise riders had bedded down for the night. Jacob hadn't slept, his back against the cool concrete wall, eyes fixed on the door, as if willing the darkness to hold its threats at bay. The air hung heavy with the remnants of last night's coffee and the faint, metallic tang of anticipation. Engines outside still warm from the night's vigil, their quiet ticks a counterpoint to the distant call of a waking desert. Ethan's soft breathing from the cot anchored him, a reminder of the fragile cargo they guarded. Not just a boy, but the living echo of Daniel's unfulfilled dreams. Noah stirred first, his bulk unfolding with a grunt, beard catching the pale glow as he checked the scanner one last time. No chatter from Tate's radio since the intercepted threat, but silence in Haven's Edge felt like the calm before a sandstorm, deceptive and loaded. Ryan was already up, brewing a fresh pot over a portable stove, the rich aroma cutting through the stale air, his limp barely noticeable in the urgency of motion. "We ride in 10, Jacob said, voice low and resolute, pushing to his feet with a creak of leather. The plan was etched in their minds. Noah and Samuel escorting the proof, Clara's logbook, the video footage, Ethan's sketched map of tampering spots, to a neutral drop point 20 miles out, where a state contact waited. Jacob, Ryan and Andrew would shadow with Ethan, drawing any pursuit, the convoy splitting to divide Tate's focus. Ethan rubbed sleep from his eyes, backpack ready with a water bottle and his flashlight, the beam flicking on, experimentally as he joined them. "Will the bad guys chase us?" he asked, voice steady, but laced with the wide-eyed curiosity of youth, his small frame silhouetted against the rising sun. Jacob knelt, meeting his gaze, the boy's dirt-flecked cheeks a canvas of innocence amid the grit. "If they do, we've got the road and each other. You spotted the danger first. Keep those eyes sharp." A nod passed between them, unspoken mentorship solidifying, the weight of Daniel's legacy pressing like a hand on Jacob's shoulder. This ride wasn't just evasion, it was a stand for the moral fiber Tate sought to unravel. Thread by thread, the engines roared to life in staggered sequence, a symphony of controlled thunder that vibrated through the lot. Dust devils spiraling in their exhaust as the bikes peeled out. Jacob led the secondary group, Ethan sandwiched between him and Ryan on a tandem setup, the wind whipping their faces with the crisp bite of morning sage. Andrew brought up the rear, his chopper's growl a vigilant echo, the highway unfolding before them like a silver scar across the arid plain. The sun climbed swiftly, baking the asphalt, mirages dancing on the horizon as they pushed 60. The rhythm of tires on pavement, a hypnotic pulse sinking their resolve. Jacob's mind raced ahead. Tate's web of corruption, rigged wrecks to scare off locals, paving the way for land grabs, mirrored the ambushes of old wars, where betrayal hid behind trusted lines. But here, truth was their armor, loyalty the fuel. 10 miles in, the trap sprung. A blockade materialized around a blind curve. 2 cruisers angled across the lane, lights flashing like predatory eyes, gravel shoulders churned by hasty positioning. Tate stood at the center, arms crossed over his starched uniform. Deputy Lucas flanking him with a shotgun propped casually, the sun glinting off its barrel like a false badge of justice. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the acrid scent of burnt rubber from their sudden stop, engines idling down to wary snarls. "End of the line, bikers!" Tate called, his drawl laced with smug authority, boots planted wide on the dusty verge. "Got reports of stolen parts from the quarry. Step off, hands where I can see 'em. That includes the kid." Jacob's grip tightened on the handlebars, the leather warm under his palms, pulse thundering in his ears like an over-revved motor. Ethan tensed behind him, small hands clutching his vest, but Jacob felt the boy's steady breath, a quiet courage born of clear sight. Ryan edged forward on his bike, voice cutting sharp. "We're just passing through, Sheriff. No parts, no trouble, unless you're admitting to scavenging junk for your side gigs." The jab landed, Tate's eyes narrowing to slits, the moral gauntlet thrown amid the standoff's electric hush. Noah's group had veered off route earlier, a decoy path to the drop. But radios crackled faintly, pursuit closing on them too. This was the escalation, Tate forcing their hand, betting on intimidation to shatter their front. Andrew dismounted first, slow and deliberate, hands raised but stance unyielding, his quiet eyes scanning for weaknesses in the blockade. "We've got witnesses, Tate. Folks tired of your games, brakes failing, axles loosening like clockwork. Step aside, or the state hears it all." The words hung in the heated air, a poetic justice uncoiling, the club's solidarity a wall against the lawman's bluster. Lucas shifted, unease flickering in his posture, the shotgun dipping slightly. Perhaps the first crack in their corrupt facade. Tate laughed, a hollow bark echoing off the empty road, but sweat beaded on his brow despite the sun. Bluffing won't save you. This town's mine. Hand over the boy. He's seen too much. Ethan's voice piped up then, small but piercing from behind Jacob. I saw you at the quarry, messing with the truck. It wasn't right. The simplicity of it struck like a wrench to the gut. Innocence weaponized against deceit, the boy's sharp eyes, those that had saved a wheel and now a legacy, laying bare the rot. Tate's face twisted, authority fracturing under the weight of truth, his hand twitching toward his holster. Jacob gunned the engine in warning, a low roar that vibrated through them all, buying seconds as Noah's voice buzzed over the comms. Proof delivered! Inbound! 5 minutes! The tide was turning, ethical pressure mounting, but Tate lunged forward. Grabbing for Ethan's arm in a desperate bid to seize the weak link, Jacob reacted on instinct, bike lurching sideways to block, Ryan's chopper surging to intercept, the clash a tangle of metal and motion on the shoulder. No shots fired, honor held the line. But the scuffle drew blood, a scraped knuckle for Lucas, a torn vest for Andrew, the air alive with grunts and the skid of boots on gravel. Tate backed off, radioing for backup, his cruiser peeling out in frustrated retreat as the distant thunder of approaching bikes, Noah's reinforcements, swelled like justice's own storm. The blockade crumbled, vehicles shoved aside in hasty disarray, the road clearing as the Iron Promise riders reformed, engines uniting in a defiant chorus. They rode hard for the garage, wind cooling the adrenaline's fire, the sun now a high judge overhead. Ethan clung tight, exhilaration mixing with the day's dust on his face, a grin breaking through. We didn't let them win, he said over the rush, and Jacob nodded, the promise to Daniel thrumming alive in his chest, redemption not in vengeance, but in standing firm for the chosen. Back at Dan's repairs, the group reconvened under the awning, proof safely dispatched, Tate's retreat a temporary victory, but shadows lingered, retaliation brewed, psychological barbs aimed at fractures, Ryan's worry, Ethan's exposure, the club's unyielding but tested bonds. As dusk painted the sky in deepening crimsons, Jacob stood with Ethan by the workbench, the boy sketching a new map of safe routes, his pencil strokes sure. The air cooled, carrying whispers of rain on the wind, a cleansing force against the grime of confrontation. Loyalty had held, but the moral suspense tightened. Tate cornered, yet dangerous, his final play looming like a loose axle on a high-speed curve. Jacob felt the weight of family chosen, sacrifices etching deeper, honor's engine pushing them toward the inevitable clash. The highway called once more, a path of quiet courage where promises refused to break. The twilight draped Haven's edge in a shroud of indigo and fading gold, the garage's fluorescent lights flickering to life like hesitant stars against the encroaching night. Jacob leaned against the workbench, the rough wood biting into his palms, the air still humming with the adrenaline of the road standoff. Dust from the chase settled slowly, mingling with the sharp scent of overheated brakes and the earthy promise of rain on the wind. Ethan sat nearby, his small frame perched on a crate, sketching idle patterns on a scrap of paper, wheels and roads, symbols of the clarity that had sparked this unraveling. Ryan hovered close, his limp a subtle shuffle as he poured fresh coffee, steam rising like unspoken worries. The Iron Promise riders encircled them, vests patched with the club's emblem, faces etched with the quiet exhaustion of a battle. Paused, not won. Noah burst through the door first, his boots thudding heavy on the concrete, the map from the drop point clutched in his fist. "It's done," he announced, voice gravelly with relief, slapping the paper down amid the clutter of tools and mugs. The state investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Eleanor from the capital's oversight unit, had taken the package without a word, her eyes narrowing at the footage's damning frames. Tate's hands on the axle, Lucas's watchful complicity, timestamps aligning with reported wrecks. She's launching an internal probe tonight. Raids on Tate's office by morning. said this kind of tampering racket's been flagged before. Ties to those developers sniffing around Route 17. The words landed like a gavel, the garage filling with a collective exhale, the tension uncoiling like a spring finally released. But Jacob's gaze drifted to Ethan, the boy's pencil pausing mid-stroke, his young face illuminated by the bulb's harsh glow. The intercepted threat echoed in his mind, Tate's venomous intent to target the weak link, the child whose eyes had pierced the veil of corruption. Redemption wasn't sealed with evidence alone. It demanded safeguarding the innocent, honoring the vow that had dragged Jacob from his solitary drift. "They'll come for him before the raids hit," Jacob said, straightening, the creak of his leather jacket a punctuation to his resolve. Ryan's eyes widened, protective fire igniting, but he nodded, the weight of brotherhood steadying him. "We fortify. No one touches the kid." The night deepened into a velvet hush, broken only by the low murmur of engines idling in the lot, sentinels against the shadows. Samuel and Andrew rigged motion sensors along the perimeter, wires snaking through the sagebrush like veins of vigilance, their quiet efficiency a testament to scars that taught survival without savagery. Inside, Ethan helped Jacob sort the last of Clara's logbook pages, his small fingers careful, the paper rustling softly. "Why do bad guys like him do it?" the boy asked, voice a whisper in the lamplit quiet, eyes reflecting the flicker of doubt that mirrored Jacob's own buried regrets. Jacob paused, the scent of ink and oil grounding him, memories of Daniel's final oath surfacing like ghosts in the valleys. "Power twists folks, kid. Makes them forget promises, but we remember for the ones who can't." Hours ticked by, the clock's hands crawling like wary scouts, the air cooling to a crisp edge that carried the faint howl of wind through the cracks. Then headlights pierced the dark, two sets, cruisers slicing toward the garage like arrows loosed in desperation. Tate's lead vehicle screeched to a halt, gravel spraying, the sheriff emerging with a fury that twisted his lean features, badge catching the moonlight like a false halo. Lucas followed, shotgun in hand, but his grip faltered, eyes darting to the encircling bikes where Noah loomed, arms crossed, a wall of unyielding loyalty. "Hand over the boy in the footage," Tate snarled, voice slicing the night, the acrid tang of his cruiser's exhaust hanging heavy. "You think a video scares me? This town's mine. Accidents happen to meddlers." Jacob stepped forward, boots crunching on the lot, the riders fanning out behind him, a phalanx of chosen kin, engines rumbling in low warning. Ethan peeked from the doorway, Ryan's hand on his shoulder, but the boy's gaze was steady, his earlier words a spark that had ignited this blaze. "It's over, Tate," Jacob said, tone even as desert stone, holding up his phone where Elena's confirmation text glowed. "Probe active." "Stand down!" The sheriff's face paled, the bluff crumbling under the weight of impending truth, his hand hovering near his holster in a final, futile grasp at control. Lucas shifted, weapon lowering, the crack in their corrupt alliance widening. Perhaps the deputy's conscience stirring, or fear of the fallout. Tate lunged anyway, a desperate swipe toward the garage door, but Noah intercepted. A solid block that sent the sheriff stumbling back, no blows exchanged, just the unassailable force of moral ground. Sirens wailed in the distance, state units closing in, lights flashing like justice's dawn on the horizon. Tate froze, the night air electric with the turning tide, his empire of rigged wheels and hollow threats fracturing in the glare. You don't know what you've started," he spat, retreating to his cruiser as Lucas followed suit, engines revving in humiliated flight. The raid vehicles arrived moments later, agents swarming with warrants, cuffing the deputies under the indifferent stars, the quarry's secrets unearthed by floodlights that banished shadows. As the chaos ebbed, Haven's Edge exhaled, the garage a haven once more. Ryan pulled Ethan into a hug, the boys' laughter breaking free, a pure sound amid the gravel's hush. Jacob watched, chest tight with the ache of fulfillment. Daniel's promise redeemed not in war's fire, but in this quiet stand, family chosen, loyalty unbent, justice poetic in its restraint. The club gathered under the awning, hands clasping in silent toasts, the wind carrying away the last vestiges of corruption like dust on the breeze. Noah clapped Jacob's back, eyes meeting in wordless understanding, brothers forged anew. Dawn broke fully then, painting the highway in soft pinks, the road stretching clean and unbroken. Ethan climbed onto Jacob's bike for one last ride, the engine's purr a lullaby of new beginnings, scents of sage and freedom filling their lungs. Ryan waved from the garage door, Dan's repairs standing tall, a beacon of honest labor restored. Jacob felt the scars lighten, redemption a steady throttle pulling him forward, the vow to Daniel woven into every mile. In a world of loose axles and crooked paths, honor endured, silent, unyielding, the true engine of legacy. The sun crested, warming their backs as they rode into the light, chosen family trailing in formation, promises kept against the endless horizon. Thank you for riding along on this journey of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds. If these stories of redemption and loyalty touch your heart, please subscribe for more tales that remind us of the power in honoring our word. Your support keeps the road open for all.